The rain hammered down like bullets on the cracked pavement as Marcus Webb sprinted across the empty parking lot, his 8-year-old daughter's school project clutched under his jacket. He was late, again. Between double shifts at the warehouse and being both mom and dad to little Emma, punctuality had become a luxury he couldn't afford. But as he rounded the corner near the old highway overpass, something made him stop dead in his tracks. A car, mangled beyond recognition, wrapped around a concrete pillar. Steam hissed from the crushed hood, and through the spider-webbed windshield, he could see her, a woman, slumped over the steering wheel, blood trickling down her temple. Marcus's heart lurched. For a split second he thought about Emma waiting at home, about how she'd already lost her mother to cancer 2 years ago. She couldn't lose him too. But even as his mind screamed at him to call 911 and wait, his feet were already moving. The acrid smell of gasoline hit him like a punch to the gut as he reached the driver's side door. It wouldn't budge. The metal had buckled inward, trapping the woman inside. Through the broken window he could hear her shallow, labored breathing, each breath a struggle, each second counting down to something terrible. Marcus yanked on the door handle with everything he had, his calloused hands slipping on the rain-slicked metal. Nothing. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" His voice cracked with urgency. The woman didn't respond, but her fingers twitched slightly. She was alive, barely holding on. Marcus looked around frantically. The highway was deserted, the rain creating a curtain that isolated them from the rest of the world. His phone was already out, 911 on the line, but the operator's voice seemed distant as she told him help was 15 minutes away. 15 minutes. The gasoline pooling beneath the wreckage told him they didn't have 15 minutes. They probably didn't have 5. Marcus had never considered himself a hero. He was just a guy trying to keep his head above water, working 60-hour weeks to keep a roof over Emma's head and food on their table. Heroes were people in movies, people with nothing to lose. He had everything to lose. But looking at this stranger, watching the life drain from her with each passing second, he realized that sometimes heroism isn't a choice. It's the only thing your heart will allow. He ran to his truck, grabbed the tire iron from behind the seat, and ran back. The gasoline smell was stronger now, and he could hear an ominous hissing from under the hood. His hands shook as he wedged the tire iron into the door frame. One chance. He had one chance to do this right. With a guttural yell that came from somewhere deep in his chest, somewhere that remembered holding his daughter for the first time, and promising to make the world better for her. Marcus pulled. The door groaned, resisted, then suddenly gave way with a screech of tortured metal. He threw it open and reached for the woman. She was younger than he'd thought, maybe early 30s, dressed in an expensive business suit now soaked with rain and blood. Her seatbelt had locked in the crash, pinning her in place. Marcus's fingers fumbled with the release button as the hissing grew louder. Click! The belt released. Marcus pulled her free, her dead weight heavy in his arms as he stumbled backward. He'd taken maybe 5 steps when the world exploded behind him. The heat wave knocked them both forward onto the wet asphalt, and Marcus instinctively curled his body around the woman's, shielding her from the flames and debris. His back screamed in pain as something hot grazed his shoulder, but he kept moving, dragging them both away from the inferno. When they were finally safe, Marcus collapsed onto his back, gasping for air. The woman lay beside him, still unconscious but breathing more steadily now. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing closer. Marcus touched his shoulder and his hand came away red, but he was alive. They were both alive. The paramedics arrived in a flurry of activity, and Marcus found himself pushed to the side as they worked on the woman. He gave his statement to the police in a daze, watching as they loaded her into the ambulance. One of the EMTs, a kind-faced woman with grey streaks in her hair, cleaned and bandaged his shoulder. "You're lucky," she said softly. "A few more seconds and you'd both be dead." "You did good." Marcus didn't feel lucky. He felt exhausted and terrified and relieved all at once. All he wanted was to go home, hold Emma tight, and maybe sleep for a week. The police told him they'd be in touch, and as the ambulance pulled away, lights flashing, Marcus realized he didn't even know the woman's name. 3 days passed. Marcus went back to work, his shoulder still aching under fresh bandages. He told Emma a simplified version of what happened. Daddy helped someone who was in trouble, and she'd hugged him so tight he thought his ribs might crack. Life returned to its familiar rhythm of early mornings and late nights, of macaroni and cheese dinners and helping with homework at the kitchen table. Then came the knock on his door. Marcus opened it to find a man in an expensive suit, the kind that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. Behind him stood a woman. The woman, her head bandaged, but her eyes bright and alert. Next to her was an older man, silver-haired and commanding, with the bearing of someone used to being in charge. "Mr. Webb?" the suited man asked. "I'm James Whitmore, and this is Victoria Langston and her father, Robert Langston." The name hit Marcus like a freight train. Robert Langston, CEO of Langston Industries, the company that owned the warehouse where Marcus worked, the company that employed half the city. Marcus had seen his face on the news, in the papers, on the massive portrait in the warehouse break room, and this woman, Victoria, was his daughter. "May we come in?" Robert Langston's voice was gentle, almost humble. Marcus stepped aside, suddenly painfully aware of his cramped apartment. The worn furniture, Emma's toys scattered across the floor. But the Langstons didn't seem to notice or care. Victoria's eyes were locked on Marcus, shining with unshed tears. "You saved my life," she said, her voice trembling. "The doctors said if you'd waited even another minute, I wouldn't have made it. You pulled me from that car and then shielded me from the explosion. You could have died." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Anyone would have done the same thing. "But they didn't," Robert Langston interjected, his own voice thick with emotion. 12 cars passed that intersection before you stopped. 12 people saw my daughter dying and drove on. But you risked everything." He paused, composing himself. "The police told me you're a single father, that you have a young daughter." Emma chose that moment to peek around the corner from her bedroom, curious about the strangers. "Daddy?" "It's okay, sweetheart," Marcus said softly. She padded over in her pajamas and Marcus lifted her onto his hip. "These are some people Daddy helped." Victoria smiled through her tears. "Hi there. What's your name?" "Emma. I'm 8. She looked at Victoria's bandage. "Did you get hurt?" "I did," Victoria admitted. "But your daddy made sure I was okay. He's a hero." Robert Langston reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "Mr. Webb, we'd like to offer you something. A thank you, though nothing could truly repay what you've done." Marcus shook his head before the envelope was even extended. "I don't want money. I did what needed to be done." "It's not money," Robert said gently. "It's a job offer. Director of Safety and Employee Welfare at Langston Industries. Better hours, better pay. Full benefits for you and Emma. You'd be working to protect other people, to make sure everyone goes home safe to their families. It's what you've already proven you do best." Marcus stared at the envelope, his mind reeling. Director, him, a guy who barely finished community college. "Sir, I appreciate this, but I'm not qualified." "You're the most qualified person I know," Robert interrupted. "Not because of a degree or experience, but because when it mattered most, when your own life was on the line, you chose to save a stranger. That's the kind of person I want looking after my employees. That's the kind of person I want my daughter to learn from." Victoria stepped forward and took Marcus's free hand, the one not holding Emma. "Please," she whispered, "let us do this. You gave me my life back. You gave my father his daughter back. This is just the beginning of us trying to say thank you." Emma looked up at her father with wide eyes. "Daddy, does this mean you won't have to work the night shifts anymore?" That's what broke him. The hope in his daughter's voice, the possibility of actually being there for breakfast, for dinner, for bedtime stories every single night. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face and he didn't bother to wipe them away. "Yeah, baby," he managed. "No more night shifts." 6 months later, Marcus stood in his new office on the 10th floor of Langston Tower, looking out over the city. He'd implemented new safety protocols across all of Langston's facilities, improved working conditions, and established a fund for employees facing hardship. He'd fought for things he'd needed himself not so long ago: childcare assistance, flexible scheduling for single parents, better health coverage. And he'd become friends with Victoria, who was now back to work and more passionate than ever about making the family business a force for good. They had lunch every Thursday, and she'd become like an aunt to Emma, showing up to school plays and soccer games, bringing presents on birthdays. The knock on his door pulled him from his thoughts. Robert Langston entered, smiling. "Got a minute?" "Always, sir." "Stop calling me sir. It's Robert." The older man joined him at the window. "I wanted to tell you something. The board met yesterday. Victoria's taking over as CEO next month. I'm retiring." "Congratulations," Marcus said warmly. "She'll be amazing." "She will. And do you know why?" Robert turned to face him. "Because 6 months ago she almost died. And in that moment when she woke up in the hospital, she told me she'd been on her way to meet with investors who wanted her to cut labor costs, reduce benefits, maximize profits. She was going to do it. But then she learned that the man who saved her life, who valued her life above his own, was one of the workers who would have been hurt by those cuts. It changed her. Changed us both." He put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You didn't just save her life that night, Marcus. You saved her soul. You reminded us both what really matters. Not profits or quarterly reports or impressing investors. People matter. Humanity matters. Kindness matters." Marcus felt the familiar sting of tears. "I was just trying to help. That's what makes it so powerful." Robert smiled. "You know what the word hero really means? It doesn't mean someone without fear. It means someone who acts despite their fear. Someone who sees another person in need and decides that helping them is more important than their own safety or comfort or convenience. You're the definition of that word, Marcus, and I'm proud to know you." After Robert left, Marcus sat at his desk and pulled out his phone. He scrolled to a photo from last week. Emma, laughing as Victoria pushed her on a swing at the park, both of them carefree and happy. He thought about that rainy night, about the split-second decision that had changed everything, about how easily he could have driven past, made it home safe, never known what he'd missed. But he'd stopped. He'd acted, and somehow, impossibly, that single moment of choosing compassion over fear had rippled outward, changing not just 2 lives but hundreds, maybe thousands. Every employee who now had better working conditions, every family who'd been helped by the hardship fund, every person who'd been inspired by the story, they were all part of that rainy night's legacy. His phone buzzed. A text from Emma sent from Victoria's phone. "Miss Victoria is teaching me chess. She says you're coming to dinner at her dad's house tomorrow. Can we go, can we? Please, please, please." Marcus smiled, typing back a response. Yes, they'd go. They'd have dinner with the Langstons, this unlikely family they'd built from tragedy and grace. They'd laugh and tell stories, and Emma would probably beat them all at chess because she was brilliant like that. And Marcus would remember, as he did every single day, that the greatest gift we can give isn't money or status or power. It's the willingness to see another person's humanity and honor it with our own. To risk, to reach out, to refuse to pass by on the other side of the road. Because in the end, we're all just strangers to each other until we choose not to be. And sometimes that choice changes everything.